BTS Arirang Tour at MetLife Stadium, a night ARMY will never forget. As BTS brought their completely sold-out Arirang Tour to MetLife Stadium, fans witnessed far more than a world-class concert. They witnessed something closer to a living, breathing organism made up of 7 men, tens of thousands of voices, and an atmosphere so dense with anticipation that it felt as though the entire stadium had been holding its breath for months, only to release it all at once the second the opening notes rang out across the field. From the earliest hours of the afternoon, long before doors even opened, the perimeter of MetLife Stadium had already transformed into something resembling a small, self-contained city built entirely by ARMY, complete with makeshift merch trading circles, impromptu sing-alongs, banners painted with inside jokes only the fandom would understand, and a shared sense of nervous, electric excitement that seemed to hum louder with every passing minute. Local vendors reported unprecedented foot traffic. Hotels in the surrounding area had been booked out weeks in advance, and rideshare drivers dropping off passengers described the scene outside the stadium as unlike anything they had experienced with any other concert, comparing the sheer density of fans arriving hours early to the kind of devotion usually reserved for once-in-a-lifetime cultural events rather than typical touring acts. The two-night event became a celebration of everything that makes BTS unique. Spectacular live vocals that somehow sounded even more powerful in a stadium setting than in a studio recording. Breathtaking production design that turned MetLife into something closer to a living art installation than a traditional concert venue. Heartfelt interactions between the members and the crowd that reminded everyone why this group's connection with its fans has remained so singular for over a decade. And countless spontaneous moments that couldn't have been planned no matter how meticulously the tour's creative team storyboarded every transition and every lighting cue. With over tens of thousands of fans filling every corner of the stadium, from the pit closest to the stage all the way up to the nosebleed sections where binoculars and giant screens became the only way to actually see the members' faces. The atmosphere remained electric from the opening performance until the final encore, never once dipping in intensity even during the quieter, more intimate segments of the setlist. Every song was met with deafening fan chants that rose up from the stands like a second layer of instrumentation, blending so completely with the actual music being performed that at certain points it became genuinely difficult to tell where the backing track ended and the crowd's voice began, creating a call-and-response dynamic that felt less like an audience watching a show and more like tens of thousands of collaborators actively participating in the creation of the performance itself. Fans traveled from across the country and, in many cases, from other continents entirely, flying in from South Korea, from various parts of Europe, from Latin America, and from Southeast Asia specifically to be present for these 2 nights, treating the trip not as a simple concert outing but as something closer to a pilgrimage, a milestone event worth rearranging entire schedules, taking time off work and saving for months in advance. Inside the stadium, the sheer visual scale of the crowd was staggering. An unbroken sea of light-up ARMY bombs stretching from one end of the venue to the other, synchronized by Bluetooth technology so that entire sections would shift color in perfect unison, painting the stands in waves of purple, then blue, then a soft, warm gold that seemed to mirror the emotional temperature of whatever song was playing at that exact moment. Security staff and stadium personnel, many of whom had worked dozens of major concerts and sporting events at the venue over the years, were reportedly overheard commenting on how unusually organized, respectful, and passionate the crowd was compared to other large-scale events they had worked, noting that despite the overwhelming numbers and the emotional intensity of the night, there was a sense of collective care running through the audience, fans helping strangers find their seats and looking out for one another in ways that added an unexpected layer of warmth to the entire experience. By the time the lights finally dimmed and the countdown clock on the massive LED screens began ticking toward 0, the noise inside MetLife Stadium had already reached a fever pitch, an overwhelming wall of screaming, chanting, and crying that seemed to shake the very foundation of the venue. And in that moment, before a single member had even stepped onto the stage, it was already clear that this was going to be an experience destined to be remembered as one of the greatest BTS concerts ever held in the United States. A night that would be replayed endlessly in FANCAMs, retold in group chats for years to come, and etched permanently into the collective memory of a fandom that has spent over a decade proving night after night, exactly why their devotion runs as deep as it does. One of the biggest highlights of the night came during the encore when the members unexpectedly turned the stage into a giant water playground, transforming what had, up until that point, been a meticulously choreographed and emotionally weighty performance into a spontaneous, joyful celebration that felt like watching seven childhood best friends let loose after a long day, rather than seven of the most famous performers on the planet closing out a massive stadium show. Instead of ending the concert with a simple farewell, a polite bow, and a scripted goodbye message, BTS embraced the summer atmosphere fully, allowing the late July heat and the giddy, exhausted energy of 2 hours of nonstop performing to dissolve any remaining formality. Laughing, running across the enormous stage, and splashing one another with water in a way that felt completely unfiltered, completely unrehearsed, and completely unmistakably them. What began as what appeared to be a single water gun or a hose being turned on almost as a joke quickly escalated into an all-out water fight involving the entire stage crew, staff members standing just off to the side, and eventually even members of the front row audience who found themselves unexpectedly soaked and thrilled about it. Taehyung became one of the stars of the moment as fans captured him sprinting across the stage with a playful, almost boyish smile stretched across his face, dodging streams of water while trying to catch the others, weaving between his members with the kind of loose, unguarded physicality that only comes out when someone feels completely safe and completely free in the moment they're in. Multiple fan cams captured him doubling over in laughter after narrowly avoiding a direct hit, only to turn around seconds later and retaliate with a water gun of his own, chasing after whichever member had just soaked him while the crowd roared with delight at every splash, every near miss, and every triumphant victory lap around the stage. Jin's priceless reactions throughout the segment quickly became some of the most replayed clips online in the days that followed. His exaggerated gasps of mock outrage whenever he got hit, his theatrical staggering and pretend collapses onto the stage floor, and his booming laughter that could be heard clearly even over the roar of the crowd, all combining to create moments that felt like pure, distilled comedy, the kind of natural charisma that no amount of scripting could ever replicate. The members' uncontrollable laughter, at times so intense that some of them had to bend over and brace their hands on their knees just to catch their breath, spread through the entire stadium like a contagious wave, with fans laughing right along with them even though most of the audience had no idea what specific joke or moment had triggered the initial outburst. It simply didn't matter because watching the members lose themselves so completely in genuine joy was infectious enough on its own. Rather than focusing on perfect choreography for those final few minutes, BTS simply enjoyed the moment together, allowing themselves to be imperfect, silly, and human in front of tens of thousands of people. A choice that speaks volumes about the level of comfort and trust that exists between the members after everything they've been through together over the years. Fans in the crowd were seen recording not just with their phones held up for a fan cam, but simply standing there, hands over their mouths, visibly moved by the fact that they were witnessing something so unguarded, something that felt less like a performance and more like an invitation into the members' actual friendship. Some attendees later described feeling an almost overwhelming rush of emotion watching the water fight unfold, saying that in a strange way it felt more special than even the most polished, high-production numbers of the night, precisely because it couldn't be repeated in exactly the same way twice. Every splash, every chase, every burst of laughter was happening for the first and only time, unscripted and unrepeatable, which made it feel like even more of a gift to witness live. The entire stadium echoed with laughter as ARMY watched the members create memories that felt completely natural and unscripted. And by the time the segment finally wound down, with members soaked from head to toe, hair plastered to their foreheads, clothes clinging to their skin, and grins still plastered across their faces, it was clear that this moment, more than almost any other from the entire two-night run, was going to live on in fan memory as one of the purest, most joyful examples of who these seven men are when the cameras feel less like an obligation and more like an afterthought. Beyond the playful chaos of the encore, the concert itself was, from start to finish, A visual masterpiece unlike almost anything else currently touring at a stadium level. A production so meticulously designed and so ambitiously executed that it seemed to redefine, in real time, what audiences should expect from a modern concert experience. Massive LED screens wrapped around nearly the entire stage structure, displaying visuals that shifted seamlessly from abstract, painterly color washes during the more emotional ballads to hyper-detailed, almost cinematic landscapes during the more energetic numbers, giving the impression that the members were performing inside an ever-changing world rather than standing on a fixed, static stage. Synchronized fireworks exploded at precisely timed intervals, perfectly matched to the musical crescendos, sending bursts of gold and white light rippling across the night sky above the stadium in a way that drew audible gasps from the crowd, even among fans who had already seen dozens of BTS concerts before and thought they knew what to expect. Dazzling lasers cut sharp, geometric patterns through the haze machines positioned around the stage, creating three-dimensional beams of light that seemed to physically hang in the air, shifting color and intensity to match the emotional register of whatever song was currently being performed. And of course, there was the sea of glowing army bombs, transforming MetLife Stadium into a breathtaking ocean of purple that stretched from the barricades at the very front of the pit all the way up to the highest, farthest seats in the upper deck, an unbroken wave of synchronized light that pulsed, shifted, and rippled in time with the music, giving the members a visual response from the crowd that was every bit as dynamic and expressive as the production happening on stage itself. Every transition between